To take your seats because now we're going to wrap it up. It would be remiss of me not to deal with what also lies under much of what we experienced and what you wrote, and what in fact goes back to your parents, your grandparents, the elders, the ancestors. And it was a defining moment in our Change It Up week when we read this piece of writing, which you don't know the title, but you certainly responded to it. And so I will invite
this poem is called A World of Red. A gifted Cree warrior woman once told me when she was a child, her eyes were bleeding onto the pages of an atlas at school, rearranging rivers, pushing lakes through to the pages below, the pages before that, looking back, the yellow of the world turning red on teachers' precious book. Columbus's New World, the blood of the Taino people, 8 million to 28,000 in 20 years. The bones of millions of native slaves, warriors, children, babes, of millions, hundreds of millions. Their red drops on the maps of the white man, soaked through to a future where resistance moves beyond the road, beyond the talk, beyond the Milky Way.
Well, I will never forget that moment when you read this, wrote about it, and then we gathered in this circle. You know, they talk about the expression, you can feel the energy. I have seldom experienced what can happen to a group when they read such words. I mean, folks, if I had had something to weigh the spirit was so heavy. After, when we gathered in that circle, honestly, it was like, it was tons and tons and tons and tons of weight on us. I'd like to share with you, Ms. Proulx-Turner, and it'll have to be brief because we do need to respect the time, but here's what one of them wrote. Stream of consciousness. This reading kind of pisses me off. Our people, for hundreds of years, suffered atrocities at the hands of the white man. All I can say is what goes around comes around. Except now, in today's society, we will fight back with education. That's our bow and arrow. They took our land, our culture, our language, almost, but you can't take away an education. The reading is complex in many ways. It indicates a book to me. In fact, it sounds like the Bible. An indication of death by millions, and also blood. So therefore, this has a very in-depth historical background. The Cree warrior woman sounds like my grandmother, Sophie Nakawasis, and her mother before. To know the things they saw and experienced must have been horrific. There is also an indication of residential schooling in the reading. So this again takes me to a place where my mother was when she was a child. They attempted the assimilation of our people. They entitled their tweet, "This writing is compelling on many levels. It is based on actual facts and events, and those facts remain." First Nations people are exactly that. First Nations, Aboriginal, call it what you will. It only strengthens my people. We have and always will rise and succeed and always be the people we've been. Strong, proud, free, and in my case, Cree. They titled your work, Voices of the Past. Named because no one listened to those voices in the past. We are listening today. And our voices have united. Loud and clear, hear our song. Idle no more. My definition of Cree, because I asked them all to define Cree, powerful. Right, you.
See that you have one word written there.
What?
You have a word written there, and it's my word for this. Yes! That's really powerful. Yeah! Bring it on.
Well, this is our final time in the circle. We have a couple of things we will get done before we leave. You know, what was that program? I never watched it, but there was this man always on TV saying, "Is that your final answer?" What's your final question, folks?
But just before, can the person who wrote this say who he or she is?
I think she's here.
I think that was Dina.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. She's like, and then I put on the more.
That's the mayor.
The one who bamboozled me.
Is she the one that called you Mr. Corn Nuts?
No, the one who called me Mr. Cornett is here, but I won't say who it is.
On a positive note, where you live in Quebec,
Yeah.
right? Where corn is sacred, and then you think about corn nuts, it can sustain you. So, not such a bad name, huh? It's kind of Indian.
Well, folks, we're going to do a few things here, and I want to mention them quickly because to keep our time limit. One is, in marketing, in publicity, they say, and it's true, there is no such thing as bad publicity. Because to get any publicity is well worth it. So, we'd like to invite you, actually, where I've been a distinguished visiting scholar at Augustana, we'd like to make it possible for Augustana University College to share what Change It Up has experienced, what you have experienced. And that's why Mr. Raj Jin is here. If you would like that publicity, if you'd like the university and others who are interested in Change It Up, in what you're doing, what you've experienced, would you please make sure to see Mr. Rajin and to sign a form. The university is not allowed to show anything whatsoever, no matter how good it is, unless you consent, unless you give your written permission. So he graciously brought the form. It will never make it into the university unless you give your permission. I'd like to reiterate, there's no such thing as bad publicity. So get yourselves out there. To me, art is about communication. If it doesn't communicate, it isn't art. So get your message out there as entrepreneurs, as business people. There's a final thing I'd like to share with you from mine, because you have shared so personally, and I'll try and keep my composure. Something that influenced me my whole life. And ironically, it's a ripoff of Native people. I was a Boy Scout, and the Boy Scouts have wolf badges, and they have bear badges, and they have lion badges, and what happens if you go through Boy Scouts? You become, guess what? An Eagle Scout. I mean, when I think back on my childhood, we took all the symbols, all the culture, all the meaning of being native. And when I was a Boy Scout, and I have to, mea culpa, I am horrible with my hands. I can do zip with my hands. But you had to do arts and crafts in Boy Scout. And they gave us this one task of beading. So all of you who are into beading, you're going to appreciate this story. I can't bead for beans. And this was part of it, because they were drawing on native culture and native, like the totems, the totem animals. So I had to do some beading. Well, my bead, you know, I was so bad in art. You know, in kindergarten they do finger painting. I was so bad in finger painting, I got kicked out in kindergarten for using somebody else's thumb. So then when they tried to get me to bead, I couldn't bead. And I kept saying to, because when you're a Boy Scout, you have a den mother. I kept saying to the den mother, I can't. I can't. I can't. And I repeated this to that poor den mother again and again and again. She's got all these young guys, all these boys, same age. But this boy kept saying, I can't. I can't. I can't. Now I knew what it means to be mothered by what this lady did. Because at the end of the year in Boy Scouts, there was a ceremony, talking about ceremony and eagle feathers. And we had to do something in art that would explain what we'd experienced that year. And I'm going to invite you in just a minute to write on the link what you've experienced this week. And she said, Norm, I want you to do something with I can't. And she went to the shoe store and she got a box for shoes, for boys' shoes. And she says, Norm, we're going to have a burial ceremony. And she had me cut out a strip and write on it in big black letters, and she says, now take this piece of paper and lay it in the box, like the coffin. And there on stage in front of everybody in the school, including my parents and my siblings, we had a burial ceremony in which she encouraged me for the rest of my life to bury I can't. And I can. And I encourage you, bury I can't, because you can do it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I invite you to write about your experience on the link right now and change it up, and we'll take a group photo before you leave.
Just a sec, but does anyone have any other comments before we wrap it up?
Well, I just wanted to say, all of us, when we were reading your poems, we all saw different things, but they were kind of the same. And what I wanted to know is, where were you at the time when you wrote some of the stuff that you wrote? I know some of it was borrowed, there were stories told to you, but to me, like, I want to know what was going through your noodle when you were putting this stuff down, because like some of the writing really affected me. Like there was one about it was cold, it was a winter scene or something, and I was like literally cold. I couldn't get warm. But like I just want to know where were you at in your mind when you wrote some of the stuff you did?
To me, writing is ceremony, and one of the things that my grandmother told me is that when you sit down and you're going to do something important, if you can't smudge or you don't have, you aren't able to, well, it's about prayer. So I always light a candle before I write, and I pray to the grandmother's temple. So they're the ones. So that's why I'm with them.
Perhaps there are other questions or comments?
I really appreciate you letting us read your writings. All of us, we all had our different points of view. Thanks to Mr. Cornett.
I've graduated, I'm Cornett now.
It did make us think totally different from the basic education we all have. Right? And this brought out our true feelings from our hearts. And the one poem that touched me is one about the feathers. Because it brought me to a time where I'd like to forget. And I did forget. But I was so overwhelmed with my inner feelings, it made me cry. And I appreciate the story. I'm sure we all do. I'd like to see your hand for that.
Others?
Be able to open dialogue and maybe look at your own poems in different after hearing how you all interpret your poems.
It did. It made me really happy that I wrote it, that I listened, you know. And when I write, I try. My intended audience is our own people, and I have a vision of us uniting, you know, because we're so divided. But us getting together, because we have so much power. And then to know that this is my first time ever doing anything like this, because usually I'm just on that, you know, circuit, like I'm reading the next few days in different places, and the audience is mostly non-native. So, but to tell you the truth, I don't really care how they feel or what they think about it. What matters to me is what we all, how we read it, and how we, what we get from it. So, yes, it made me happy that I listened to my auntie and my grandpa.
The last poem, which was really, you know, heavy in our hearts, guys, it was tough to read, and like to go back in your mind and think of the atrocities that our ancestors went through, and made me really mad. Made me really mad. But I was, you know, we did brought me from there to where I am, and everything in between, and how our people are just still, you know, trying to heal, and my own personal journey of healing. But my own personal journey of healing is just like everybody else's. You know, it's how we still have a long way to go. But also, when you mentioned the Milky Way and the universe, and it's like, well, we're still like this, and there's a whole universe out there, and they kind of put that into perspective. Like, it's not that big that we can't, you know, we can't overcome it. So, I appreciate that.
I got one more that suggests that this was Southwest School. What you had us doing all week. I was wondering if you could do that, but not what the readings are at least, but you would be able to change it up a little for this one. I want to see your stream of conscience.
Well, I can tell you, when this almost didn't happen because of the weather, I pulled an all-nighter, because to me, life is about keeping promises. I said, we got to keep our promise to them, no matter what. And so it meant changing a lot of schedules and logistics. Our youngest daughter contacted me. And you, Ms. Northwest, you threw me a curveball, eh? You remember what you asked me? Remember she said, what if you lived in a native-dominated world? And that really got me thinking.
2035.
Sooner.
You're still alive.
And I responded to her, if I could learn to learn from you, I'd survive. And my experience has been how much I've learned from you. In a nutshell.
I was just going to say
So we'd like to get a group photo, but first could you please go on the computer and write what you think about,
Just one more little thing is that what you were saying there, it just reminded me of my friend. He told me that he saw this movie a couple of weeks ago, and he said, I've seen so many movies about the Jewish Holocaust, but this one, he said, for some reason, it just really stuck with me. And he didn't really say much about it. He was just having so many feelings. Then I told my bestest buddy about it, and she's like, oh, I saw that movie, she says. And you know what she said? One thing, and she's native, she says, the one thing about that movie that really stuck in my mind, and I really remember what she said. The movie was about this woman who saved all these names of people who were killed in concentration camps. And she had this book full of names. And then many years later, she met up with a man who told her to collect those names and to remember. He told her to remember. So she collected all these names. But then she met years and years later, and her husband, the woman's husband, said that he lived a really hard life because all she did was collect the names and interfere with her life, their happiness, their joy in life. And that man told her, he was crying, and he said, I'm so sorry, because what I forgot to tell you was not just to remember, but to live. To live. No matter what happens to us, no matter what has happened to us, as we all know what it is to live our lives. It's such a joy.
Well, on behalf of Change It Up and each of the seminar members, many thanks, Michelle. And if you could go on the computer to the link and write what you think about what we did this afternoon. And we'd like to get a group photo before you leave.
Another picture.